everyone, it's Alana and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap up. I had to have a little think then because these months are just flying by, so we're just going to jump right into it. One little side note is that from now on I'm going to be trying to do the lowest rated book first and then make my way to my favorite book of the month. Without further ado, let's start. My lowest rated book for this month, and I feel sort of bad saying this because it wasn't a bad book, but it was Monuments by Will Kostakis. Now this one follows a group of teens who discover gods beneath Sydney, and it's an adventure type story of them going all over the city in order to wake the gods, find them, all of that good stuff. Like I said, I didn't mind this book. It was a good adventure tale, but my only gripe with it was that I was expecting it to be more fantasy first and YA contemporary setting second, whereas it wasn't. It was flipped. So this read contemporary first with bits of fantasy in it, and I feel like there could have been some growth in the fantasy department. Like, it wasn't as fleshed out as I would like it to be, but it was still an easier to consume book, tale, whatever. Will I pick up the second one? Probably, because I like to finish series once I've started them. It may take me ages to finish the series, but I like to make the commitment. Things that I did enjoy about this book were the main character. I enjoyed one of the side characters immensely. Lockie, I think he was. I enjoyed his little part in the story. I also enjoyed the fact that this was set in Sydney, Australia, because there's not that many fantasies that you find that are actually set in Australia, so that was also cool. The diversity in this one, also great, but I've since learned that Will Kostakis is excellent for including diverse characters, and I applaud him for that. And yeah, overall, I'm thinking 3.5 stars out of 5 for this. Wasn't a bad book, but a little bit forgettable. I'm not sure. Next up we have Feeling Sorry for Celia by Jacqueline Moriarty. This is a YA contemporary set in Australia, again by an Australian author, which I'm really enjoyed the fact that I read multiple Australian authors this month. And this one is told in a pretty interesting format. It's like letters and post-its and that sort of thing, which I didn't know going into it. And I think that's why this one got 3.5 stars from me, because I wasn't expecting the whole thing to be a compilation of letters, post-its, fridge notes, that sort of thing. Having said that, I did enjoy this book. It tackles some issues in it in a sort of light way, but also with them still being present to the plot and the storyline. And this one sort of gave me vibes of Louise Renason's books. So if you've heard of these, if you've read these, I read these as a teenager and I loved them. The movie was okay and it was named different, but that's fine. This is probably the Australian version of this, but a little bit more grown up. But yeah, overall, not a bad book either. It was just not what I was expecting when I picked it up. If I had gone into this knowing it was what it was, I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more. It did take me a little bit to get into it as well, but once I did, I started feeling for the main character. She goes through like boy troubles, best friend troubles. Her best friend also did not like one single bit, just don't like that. But she finds support in a pen pal that she makes through school, and I really love that element of it, and of how friendships that are new can be just as important as old friendships. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that one. Next up we have another Will Kostakis book. This is The Sidekicks, and this one again set in Australia, so really repping the Aussie stories and the Australian authors this month. In this one we follow 3 characters who are trying to find their way through high school after the death of their best friend that draws them all together. I feel like this book tackled some pretty big issues of, you know, the death of a young person and the impact that that has upon people at school, their best friends, the teachers, all of that. And I also really liked how this was told through multiple perspectives and how each perspective was crafted. You can tell for sure who you're reading just by the tone of the voice, and even with the last one, how it's sort of set out, because it's sort of like how his mind works, I think. I will say the one thing that confused me a little bit in this to start off with was when part 2 picks up and you've got your second character taking over from the story, that the timeline actually reverts back to the start of the first one. I thought it would sort of chronologically continue on, but it doesn't. So just keep that in mind if you read this. It is a really good book, and I think it is a good YA contemporary for those that want to read a serious issue in their contemporaries. But yeah, just be in mind when each character takes over telling their part of the story, it will take you back to the start of the story when their main friend dies. So yeah, this one I think I gave 3.5, maybe 4 stars. I enjoyed it. It was a contemporary. I don't read a lot of contemporary anymore, but for what it was good. I still remember most of what happens, which usually doesn't really happen if I smash through a few contemporaries at once. So yeah, if you want to pick up an Australian set YA contemporary dealing with a serious issue, try this one. The 4th book that I read in October and the 3rd favourite of the month was The Deathless Girls by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. It's a lot of names there, but that's fine. This one was tricky for me. I feel like the blurb of this / premise of this is a little bit of a tease for what actually happened. Don't let me scare you off by saying that. Let me explain. So this is a retelling of the brides of Dracula and how they come to be the brides of Dracula. But with this one, it takes a while to get to that point, and then that portion of the story is right at the end, and it all sort of happens at once. This is more the origin story of 2 of the brides of Dracula more than anything. And I did enjoy it. It did feel a little bit slow in the start, but when things started happening, they were good. The world was very thoroughly built, and I applaud the author for that. In this world, there's settlers and then there are travelers, and the names for those 2 groups of people sort of are self-explanatory. You've got the settlers that live in villages, and then you've got the travelers, which are a traveling group of people who live on the road and in the forests and things like that. Your main character is a traveler, and it goes through the adversaries that she faces being a traveler versus being a settler. And I think that was a good point in the book. I really enjoyed that element because it felt real, and it made the world seem more authentic, if anything. Travelers have different things that they can do as well. For example, her mum is a bear dancer, from what I remember. There are seers and things like that, so this is fantasy. But yeah, it took a little bit for the story to start off, but I did end up enjoying it. There is also a same-sex romance in this, and I liked that element as well. I feel like this deserves a sequel though, because I was more interested in Dracula's wives and the life that they led as his wives. I wanted to see some of their backstory, sure, but I didn't expect like this much of a book on backstory. So I would be interested in a sequel to flesh that out a little bit more. I think this one ended up getting a 4 stars from me. Like I said, it was a slow build up, but once things started happening, I really enjoyed it, and the world was very thorough, which I also enjoyed. I love good world building. And my second favorite of this month was Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. I struggled with this to start off with. Let me just begin by saying that. This one wasn't easy to get into, and there is a few times where the time period flips back and forth, and that gets a little bit confusing, but once I put the time into this, I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna say this is adult fantasy, even though the main character starts off as an 8-year-old, she starts off killing someone, and it's quite full on with the death and the training to become an assassin type thing. She is in a convent for nuns, but they are killer nuns, so that was an interesting experience. Basically, the way I would describe this one is it's like Harry Potter, but leveled up and stabby and dark, because you do have the school setting and the learning environment, which is very interesting, and I love that aspect of it. But Nona, the main character, is very bloodthirsty. So there's that. So yeah, I did end up enjoying this one. It is heavy fantasy, and when I say heavy fantasy, I mean the language used and just the time frames and basically the high fantasy setting. Like, I don't know, it's a bit dense in parts, but it's also really good. So go into this one expecting a bit of a slog for about this much, and then you'll enjoy it. I know this one's quite popular too, so I don't know how other people have gone with their reading experiences, but that's just been my experience. This one ended up getting 4 stars, maybe 4.5. I haven't quite decided yet because the start was hard to get into, but I'm excited to pick up the next one when I get around to it. And my favorite book of the month was The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Seppersley. Shout out to The Nerd Daily and Penguin for giving me a free copy to read and review. This book was amazing, 5 stars, straight up. If you love historical fiction, if you want to learn about 1950s Madrid in Spain and the dictatorship that was going on there, pick this one up because I highly, highly recommend this, and now I need to go out and buy more books by this author to see if the magic continues on throughout all her books, because holy shit, this was amazing. So in this one we followed Daniel, who I think is 18 or something, and he is from Texas, and he is also part Spanish, so he takes a trip back with his parents to Madrid, where he meets the other main character, Anna. Anna works at the hotel that he is staying at, and the story just unfurls from there. It's part love story, part star-crossed lovers. It's probably how I would portray it, with a lot of political action through it, and it was just so easy to consume this one. This book also tackles the issue of the missing children in that era, which I had no idea about. It was this whole thing that the government was doing where basically they would take babies, tell the parents that they'd died. The divide of Spain with the Republicans that were basically tortured and jailed and imprisoned, and their children were taken off of them, and the Nationalist Party, which was led by General Franco, and this book covers those topics, and it was just amazing, heart-wrenching, punchy and real, and I loved it. So there you go. Those are the 6 books that I read in the month of September. It was a little bit of a mixed reading month for me. I had a lot of books that I rated sort of in the middle range there, and I don't know if that's just because it was more of a varied month. Like I had some YA contemporary, I had YA fantasy, I had dense fantasy, and then like gothic retelling, and then also historical fiction, so there was a little bit of everything in there, but overall I still count it as a pretty good reading month. The reason why this is probably one of my lesser wrap-ups is because I was also binge watching a lot of Netflix. So I binged all the seasons of Glow, which is Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, and that was amazing. I think I heard somewhere that it's done by the same people that did Orange is the New Black, so winning. I also finished off Orange is the New Black, and I started How to Get Away with Murder. So I consumed a lot of Netflix this month, and I also played a little bit of PlayStation. So that's why it was a little bit of a smaller reading month than usual, but I'm not disappointed with that. 6 books in 1 month is still amazing for me. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I want to know down below though, just before I go, what's your favorite genre to read and why? So drop that in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye!